I live on a quiet stretch of land that backs up to a peaceful little creek, the kind of place where frogs sing at night and deer drink at sunrise. It used to be my grandfather's property, and when he passed, he left it all to me, his old fishing lodge, the gardens, even the bees he loved to keep. I thought it was my little slice of heaven, that is, until Karen Davis moved in next door. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was on the HOA board, and not just a member, but the kind who loved to boss people around. She didn't like that I kept to myself. She didn't like my bees or the wildflowers, or that I wouldn't beautify my fence with fake ivy like everyone else. But what she hated most, that I wouldn't give her a key to the fishing lodge. See, the lodge sat close to the creek, and it was technically on a piece of land the HOA wanted to claim, but it wasn't theirs. It was mine, marked on every map, backed by every deed, and protected by every law I had in a folder thicker than a phone book. At first, I tried to be polite. I smiled. I explained the history. I even invited her for tea once. Big mistake. That's when Karen decided to make things personal, and not long after, her friend Chandler showed up, a guy with a shady past and a clipboard full of fake rules. He was the HOA treasurer, and he talked like he owned the whole neighborhood. Together, they were about to turn my peaceful life upside down. And all because I told them one simple word. No, it started with a fence, not just any fence, a crooked, rust-colored thing that Karen slapped right along the property line, only it wasn't the property line. She claimed the creek belonged to the HOA now, and she was beautifying the area for community use. But her so-called beautification project just happened to block the only footpath to my fishing lodge. Coincidence? Yeah, right. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I did what my grandfather always told me to do: show up with facts, not fists. So I printed out the survey plat, the deed, and the easement agreement. I walked over to Karen's place and explained calmly that the fence was illegal and it had to come down. Karen stared at the papers like they were written in ancient Greek. Then she did what Karens do best: she called the sheriff. 15 minutes later, Deputy Rogers pulled up in his cruiser. He was no stranger to HOA drama, and he had that tired "what now" look on his face before I even waved him down. Karen rushed over, arms flailing, claiming I was harassing her and destroying HOA property. I handed Rogers the documents. He took one look, nodded, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you're trespassing. Take down the fence. Have a nice day." Karen's face turned the color of boiled shrimp. She stormed back inside without another word. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because Karen wasn't just angry, she was embarrassed. And Karen Davis did not handle embarrassment well. That fence, that was just the beginning. The real storm hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks after the fence incident, I came home from the feed store to find something that stopped me cold. My back gate was hanging off its hinges, 3 clean cuts right through the metal wiring. Deep tire tracks led from the road down toward the creek. Someone had driven across my yard like it was a public park. And then I saw the mess. One of my beehives smashed to pieces, frames tossed into the mud like trash, honey leaking across the grass while bees swarmed in confusion. My stomach sank. Pixel, my dog, barked once and limped over to me. His paw was bleeding. I found a homemade nailboard just inside the fence line. Someone had planted it, on purpose. The vet patched Pixel up and gave him antibiotics, said to watch for infection. I watched for something else: revenge. That night, I ordered 4 motion sensor cameras, high-resolution night vision alerts every 10 seconds if anything moved. I wasn't playing nice anymore. I also called a licensed surveyor, Nora Beltran. She didn't smile much, but she was sharp. She remarked the boundary lines with bright orange stakes and posted laminated signs warning of criminal charges for tampering. 3 nights later, at exactly 1:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I pulled up the live feed. 2 shadowy figures were yanking the stakes from the ground and tossing them into the creek. One had bolt cutters. The moonlight hit his face just enough to show a familiar smirk. Chandler. And the second person, short, platinum blonde, hoodie slipping just enough to reveal her face. Karen. They were caught red-handed on my property with tools at night. I called Deputy Rogers. He didn't hesitate. He got a warrant and showed up at Chandler's house at dawn. Bodycam footage later showed Chandler standing in the doorway in pajama pants, rubbing his eyes. I was asleep, man, must be a mistake. Rogers held up a printed still from the footage. Chandler mid-stride holding bolt cutters like a trophy. Chandler shut up. Karen, on the other hand, tried to blame him for everything. Claimed he must have stored some tools in her garage without her knowledge. But Rogers found the missing survey stakes, the spray paint from my defaced signs, and Nora's stolen placards, all hidden behind Karen's bins. It was over. They were both arrested on the spot. Karen made bail by lunchtime. But Chandler, he didn't get so lucky. Turns out he was already on probation for a check-kiting scheme from 2021. And this time there'd be no second chances. While Chandler sat behind bars trying to weasel his way out of yet another mess, my lawyer Elliot got to work. He filed a subpoena for the HOA's financial records, and that's when the dam broke. Turns out the $3,500 Karen used to install that illegal gate near the creek, it came straight from the HOA's reserve fund, and the check that paid for it, signed by none other than Chandler. We kept digging, and what we found wasn't just a little fence fraud, it was a full-blown embezzlement operation. Chandler had written nearly $46,900 worth of fake grounds improvement checks, all cashed, all with forged invoices. Not a single improvement had ever happened. No new benches, no repaired walking trails, just made-up projects on made-up paper. The gate was just the cherry on top. The HOA board was stunned, red-faced, furious. They had no idea this had been happening right under their noses. They voted unanimously to press charges against Chandler. That's when Detective Miriam Page from the White Collar Crimes Unit stepped in. She confiscated Chandler's computer, printer, and HOA files. What she found was next-level shady. Forged meeting minutes. Dozens of fake receipts. A Photoshop file with a green approval stamp template, the same one used on all the official documents. But the worst part, a wire transfer from the HOA account directly into Karen's private bank account, labeled consulting fees. She had been getting paid to help cover it up. Karen lawyered up immediately. Her attorney, a man named James Hall, charged $600 an hour just to sit there and glare at reporters. But Chandler, he started sweating bullets. Facing a revoked probation and new felony charges, he knew he couldn't take the fall alone. So he did the one thing Karen never expected. He turned on her. In exchange for a plea deal, Chandler agreed to testify against Karen, every shady scheme, every midnight mission, every lie she whispered into his ear to convince him they'd get away with it. That was the moment the tide turned. No more hiding, no more lies, no more pretending Karen was just a concerned neighbor. She was a fraud. And now the whole town was about to find out. After months of hearings, filings, and courtroom whispers, the moment finally came, the trial. Chandler, now officially a state witness, took the stand in a navy jumpsuit and told the entire story. He didn't hold back. He laid it all out, how Karen had promised him a slice of my land if they could get it annexed by the HOA, how she drafted the forged property documents, and how he had helped remove my survey stakes under cover of darkness. His voice cracked when the prosecutor asked why he went along with it. "She told me nobody would believe you," he said, looking straight at me from the stand. Then came the smoking gun. The prosecution rolled the courtroom TV forward and played my security footage, the one from 12:47 a.m., where Karen and Chandler were caught loading rebar and spray cans into her SUV, time-stamped, clear as day. The jury didn't need long. They found both of them guilty on all charges: felony conspiracy to defraud, criminal mischief, trespassing, theft. The judge revoked Karen's bail on the spot. Her sentence, 18 months in state prison and $78,900 in restitution, $32,000 to me for property damage, legal costs, and veterinary bills, and $46,900 to the HOA for every stolen cent. She also got a 5-year no-contact order and was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. I looked at her once during sentencing, just once. And I gave her a polite wave, not out of smugness, but because that was the chapter closing. Chandler, in exchange for his testimony, got 4 years with parole eligibility after 2. The judge reminded him that any violation would send him back to prison without appeal. But the best part: after the sentencing, the new HOA president and several neighbors came over and shook my hand. "We should have listened sooner," one of them said. "You were right. The fishing lodge secure, the creek peaceful again, my beehives rebuilt and buzzing. And Pixel, he ran across the yard like it was his kingdom." Because it was, with Karen behind bars and the scandal fully unraveled, something shifted in the neighborhood. The new HOA board, an entirely fresh group of residents, sent me a formal apology. Along with it came a check for $4,500, funds recovered from Chandler's frozen accounts, earmarked to repair the beehives Karen's scheme had destroyed. That apology meant more than I expected. I didn't cash the check right away. I just stared at it for a while, then pinned it to the wall above my workbench. It was a symbol not of money, but of closure. And I finally started building the greenhouse I had dreamed about for years, right where Karen had tried to claim a slice of my land. The irony was sweet. The air filled with the scent of fresh soil and tomato starts. Native wildflowers, sunflowers, bee balm, and milkweed lined the edges of the creek. My bees were thriving again, and Pixel, he ran joyful laps through the meadow, his paw fully healed. That summer, I joined a local agricultural co-op and for the first time sold jars of wildflower honey labeled Creek's Edge Gold. They sold out within days. Neighbors came by with seedlings and asked questions about pollinators. Kids from the school down the road visited to learn how honey is made. The land that had once been the center of a toxic feud was now something healing, something abundant. But just when I thought it was over, a letter arrived. A woman named Elaine Castor claimed to be Karen's cousin. In it, she insisted that Karen had granted her a private right of way across my land. A thinly veiled threat, an attempt to shake me down, no doubt. But Elliot, my ever-prepared lawyer, pulled up the original deed surveys, digital timestamp records, and even county clerk statements. Within days, Elaine's claim dissolved like sugar in tea. Spring came early that year. And with it, a small surprise, a restitution check from the state's crime victim fund, just $58 garnished from Karen's prison wages. It wouldn't even cover a high frame. But I cashed it anyway. Because it meant that the system, flawed though it was, had finally spoken on my behalf. Just when I thought life had returned to normal, I received one last curveball. A letter arrived on crisp stationery, Elaine Castor, Karen's supposed cousin, claiming to be the rightful heir to Karen's property. She insisted that Karen had secretly granted her a private right of way across my land. It wasn't much more than a poorly disguised bluff, an attempt to create legal chaos and force a settlement. She was banking on the fact that my guard was down and maybe I'd be worn out after everything that had already happened. But she underestimated one thing. I was ready. Thanks to Elliot, I had kept the original property deeds, boundary maps, and all correspondence about the land disputes safely filed. He immediately went to work, diving into historical land records, verifying timestamps, and checking for any new filings under Elaine's name. It took a few weeks, but we did it. Elaine's deed, completely forged. The notary on the document, non-existent. Her claim fell apart faster than a sandcastle in a rainstorm. Elaine withdrew her entire case before even reaching a court hearing. I can't say it wasn't frustrating, the nerve of trying to resurrect something already buried, but by the time the last of the legal dust settled, I realized something. This was the final attempt to claim a piece of my land, a piece of my peace, and it had failed just like every other attempt before it. By October, I had finally put everything behind me. Sprout Tomorrow, the local organic farming nonprofit that had purchased Karen's property, invited me to consult on planting native pollinators along the creek that bordered my land. It felt surreal to stand there on the land where so much hostility had once brewed, now transformed into a vibrant garden. The irony was not lost on me. Karen had tried to control her neighbors, to bully and scheme her way into land she didn't deserve. Now her old lawn was a sanctuary for the community, a place where people volunteered, worked together, and grew something beautiful. I even loaned them my brush cutter one weekend. That Saturday, Deputy Rogers showed up along with several new members of the HOA board. We worked side by side, tearing down the remnants of Karen's old garden and turning it into raised beds and tomato vines. The air smelled like fresh earth, and the sound of laughter echoed across the once confrontational property. That evening, they hosted a harvest dinner at the community garden, featuring produce grown from Karen's old land. Dishes like roasted butternut squash, garlic honey carrots, and heirloom tomato bruschetta filled the tables. I even got a little nod of recognition for my part in the whole ordeal, but I shrugged it off. The real victory, the true win, was seeing how everything had come full circle, how nourishment had grown from the same soil that once hosted conflict. As for me, I rebuilt what had been taken, not just my beehives or the creek bank, but something far more important, my peace. And in the process, I rebuilt my own life. I planted new dreams, both literal and figurative, as the land now hummed with life. Pixel ran through the fields, chasing his favorite butterfly. I watched him, a content smile spreading across my face. We had both earned this peace, this new beginning. The barn I built from reclaimed wood, the wood that Karen had once tried to use as part of her petty plan, now stood proudly as a reminder of everything that came before and everything that came after. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much had changed since that first small dispute over property lines. What seemed like an easy resolution, a simple misunderstanding, had snowballed into something bigger, something personal. But in the end, I realized that it was never really about the land or the property. It was about standing up for what's mine, what's rightfully mine. The emotional weight of those months, those battles, and the stress of living with Karen's constant harassment has lifted now. It's been replaced by a quiet kind of peace, a peace I fought for, a peace I built. I think about the simple things more now. The sound of the creek, the hum of the bees, the way the sun sets over the land. I spent so long focusing on the conflict, the noise, the drama, but now it's the quiet moments that bring me the most satisfaction. Watching the plants I've nurtured grow, seeing Pixel chase butterflies, and knowing deep down that it was my strength that got me here. There's no bitterness left, just a quiet, firm understanding that some things like justice and peace are worth every fight. The real reward isn't in the victory itself, but in how you rebuild, how you heal, and how you keep going after all the storms. The barn, the bees, the garden, these are all just symbols. The real victory is the quiet strength I've found within myself. And with that, I'm ready for whatever comes next, because no one can take my peace, not anymore.